Assalamu alaikum, all of you. How are you guys doing? Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina. How are you?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Sayyidina. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm so sorry. I was busy with Brother Taha. So
No,
I
no, no,
did.
no, no worries. I know you must be busy, but
That's fine.
Alhamdulillah. Sayyid Taha, how are you?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله شيخنا. How are you? الحمد لله with your
Alhamdulillah.
prayers.
Jazakumullah.
الله يحفظك الله يحفظكم.
Jazakumullah. May Allah bless you for all your work, inshallah.
For all of جميعا إن شاء الله.
I'm glad to see the kids, the youths, the youngsters are on early, bright and early, mashallah.
ما شاء الله. Yes, ما شاء الله. Allah keep them protected.
Allahi ameen, Allahi with you all. Both of your leadership, may Allah bless you all, inshallah.
May Allah bless you as well, inshallah.
Thank you, Jazakallah. I will keep myself on silent so I don't interrupt you guys, but I am here if you need anything, eh?
Sure, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah. Bimanallah.
Yeah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام
عليكم السلام ورحمة
الله. Inshallah, you all are keeping well and protected. And as you understand, as the email was sent out, due to the rising cases in COVID, the Jama'ah had decided to move the program online. And inshallah, we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps you all protected, and inshallah helps us, provides us relief from this wabah, from this pandemic that surrounds us, and keeps all the lovers, all the people protected, inshallah, the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, those from the community. Inshallah, we'll start the Thursday night program with the recitation of Surah Yasin, and for it, I'll request my dear brother Pervez and brother Muqdad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع ذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثل أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلى البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلية يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت بيت قوم يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنة من نخيل وعنب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت وأيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلغ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينصلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وظللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناهم من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي قل قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فضلا جزاكم الله خير الجزاء. Thank you very much. These were Brother Pervez and Brother Miqdad, who are reciting Surah Yasin. And inshallah, we will request Brother Ilyas and Brother Ali Mahboubi to inshallah recite Dua Kumail. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على
محمد
محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أحسنت.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك العصم اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشوته اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي وأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسأده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى عليه فيه قضاءك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد آتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك اللهم فقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتغاء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنالك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعة لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تباعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من آويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طاعية وشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا ظنوا بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته فكيف احتمالي للبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها ضج وأبكي لألئم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر على النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيجا آمنين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء فاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين صلى
اللهم صل على محمد وآله.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وهبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسلوا إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباح أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك ظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبح لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما هكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حكمتها وهكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تحبلي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أغفيته وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رزقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وهالي في خدمتك سرمدا، يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوته أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العزيمة جوانه، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم العجاب فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجاي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعداي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاهه البكاء يا سابغ النعام يا دافع انتقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا صلوات.
الفاتحة. بسم الله.
صدق الله العظيم. جزاكم الله khair. Thank you all of you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear brothers and sisters. Once again, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. Despite we're not in person, but we are able to still hold these gatherings on Thursday nights. May Allah accept these acts of worship. We had our respected dear brothers, Brother Elias Sarlizi and Brother Ali Mahboubi, who were reciting a beautiful recitation of Dua Kumail, and before them were Brother Pervez and Brother Miqdad Huda, who were reciting Surah Yasin. Allah accept these acts of worship, and Allah inshallah bestow us the opportunity that we are able to increase in the hasanah that He bestow and increase the tawfiqat inshallah. I'll start by sharing the screen. So today, my apologies. So today, inshallah, we'll have a slightly different platform. We'll be doing the session on Nearpod. So I'll give you a couple minutes to, inshallah, if you to go on Nearpod, and on nearpod.com, you can scroll down to the students area, and then you can enter the code that you see on the top left corner of your screen, which is 76UEZ. So the Jamaat has, alhamdulillah, been arranging in almost every lecture. There's a part every Thursday night. There's a part about Masail on about 10 to 15 minutes on Masail, and then after that, at the once a month, a review is done just to cover the topic that has been covered. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed with the presence of our respected Sheikh Shafiq Huda as well, who's present. And Sheikh, please, by all means, inshallah, you're in a better position, better fit.
Jazakallah khair, Sayyidina. MashaAllah, may Allah bless you and reward you for all you've done and continue to do. I am here if you need me.
Jazakallah khair. We always need you. Alhamdulillah. May Allah increase your tawfiqat and keep you protected, and all the lovers and all the fellow community members. Inshallah, while the brothers and sisters are joining in on nearpod.com, we'll have a short audio clip by the uncle, inshallah, a recitation. Sallu ala Muhammad wa
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة فيا ليتني كنا معك فنفوز فوزا عظيما زبان حال حضرت زینب با مادرش در کودکی شد قسمت من خانه‌داری در کودکی شد قسمت من خانه‌داری هم خانه‌داری میکنم هم سوگواری هم خانه‌داری میکنم هم سوگواری گیرم برای نور زینت گیرم برای نور زینت هر شب دهم آب دست حسینت هر شب دهم آب دست حسینت دیشب دعا کردم اجل جانت گیرد دیشب دعا کردم اجل جانت بگیرد امشب دعا کن دخترت زینب بمیرد امشب دعا کن دخترت زینب بمیرد دیشب تو بودی اندر کنارم دیشب تو بودی اندر کنارم امشب دیوار سر میگذارم امشب دیوار سر میگذارم دیشب نشستی گیسویم را شانه کردی دیشب نشستی گیسویم را شانه کردی امشب در آغوش لحد کاشانه کردی امشب در آغوش لحد کاشانه کردی دیشب گرفتی اشکم زدیده دیشب گرفتی اشکم زدیده امشب ز داغت پشتم خمیده امشب ز داغت پشتم خمیده دادی به دست زینب با آوازاری دادی به دست زینب با آوازاری پیراهن خون خدا یادگاری پیراهن خون خدا یادگاری آن پیراهن را هرگز نشویم آن پیراهن را هرگز نشویم تا عطر مادر از آن ببویم تا عطر مادر از آن ببویم مادر چرا رنگ از خد ماهت پریده مادر چرا رنگ از ماهت پریده مادر چرا خون از گریبانت چکیده مادر چرا خون از گریبانت چکیده گاه دعا راز و نیازت گاه دعا و راز و نیازت سجاده بکشا وقت نمازت سجاده بکشا وقت نمازت برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله محمد وعلى أجمعين الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتخبين خدایا این روزه‌ای که به حضرت زینب و حضرت فاطمه زهرا خوانده قبول درگاه بگردانی جمیع مریضای ما را صحتیاب بگردانی اموات ما را غریق رحمت بی منتها بگردانی برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين الفاتحة مع الإخلاص والصلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Alhamdulillah, so that was a recitation. May Allah accept as it was mentioned these acts of worship. Inshallah, I see a number of people who have joined us on nearpod.com. And just a reminder, if you go to www.nearpod.com, scroll down, there'll be a students area, there'll be the teachers area. In the students area, enter the code that you see over here, 76UEZ. So 76UEZ, I see about 11 people joined in with us. So inshallah, we'll proceed. On Nearpod, what happens is, inshallah, we'll go over the material. Between the material, there'll be a few questions. And then towards the end, there's a Kahoot style game. They'll have questions. So inshallah, we'll go over it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So as we mentioned, when it comes to water, there are two types. We can classify or categorize water in two categories according to its quality and according to its quantity. When we talk about the quality of water, there are two terminologies that we come across. Water being mixed, that is known as mudaf, and water being pure. Mixed water, as the name implies, is water that is not in its original form. It's been mixed with something else, like for example, some type of juice, some type of rose water, for example, which has something else mixed into it. Even in the case, for example, if there's so much dust that has been mixed into the water that no longer called water, then that would also be considered as mixed water. So what are some examples of mudaf water that you can think of, other than those that have been mentioned here? So on nearpod.com on your screens, nice. So yes, so juice, any type of juice perhaps would be considered as mudaf water. So for those who are using Nearpod for the first time, on your devices, on your computers, if you've joined on the, you would be able to see this particular screen, and you would have this bar where you can enter your answer, and it'll get posted over here. Just so that you're comfortable sharing your answers, I've kept it anonymous, the names. But inshallah, in the game mode, I'll turn this back to where you'd be able to see your names over there, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, yeah. So coconut water, oil, rose water. So the water that is falling from wudu, all right? So the water that you've basically, the wudu that you've done, the water is still pure, it's still mutlaq, right? So it doesn't turn into mixed water because as we will see, none of the properties of that water change in terms of its taste, smell, color, all right, unless obviously there is something that is there in the mixed with the water that makes it changes these properties then. But in generally, we do not have that type of change. Tea, scent, smoothie, right? Yes, so these are all type examples of mudaf water. Symptom. Coffee, yes. Good. Now, on the other type, where we're talking about the quantity of water, quantity, the main unit that we use in order to distinguish between the different quantities of water is known as khur. So khur is a volumetric unit that has an approximate dimension of 384 liters. If you do not have a certain unit to measure, a tape or a way of measuring it, what you can do is you can use a handspan. So a handspan is typically 22 centimeters from the thumb to the pinky, to the smallest finger. And if you have a container that is 3.5 handspan in terms of its width, length, and height, so basically 3.5 handspan cubed, then that would be considered roughly the khur water volume. So it is about 384 liters. Now, the mas'ala that we had learned was that if an intrinsic impurity like blood, for example, or urine, so something that is intrinsically impure, something that is by itself impure, if it falls into a container with khur water, meaning a container that has more than 384 liters of water, and that water acquires either the smell, the color, or the taste of that impurity, then it will become impure. But if it does not, then the water does not become impure, right? So any water that is less than khur, we will see the mas'ala, regardless whether these properties change or not, it will be impure. But for the vessel, that container that has water more than khur or more than khur, only if these properties change because of this intrinsic impurity, then it would be najis. If it doesn't change, then it's not najis. Okay. The other mas'ala regarding the water connected to a core source. So for example, a water, in a fountain that is connected to a core water, it purifies impure water. But there's a condition when it comes to fountain water, that if the water is falling drop by drop, it does not purify it. But if the water drop falls in such a way that it's connecting, then in that case, it'll be flowing. But again, it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be as disconnected as mentioned, that it just should not fall on the impure water drop by drop. Okay. The next is the tap water. So for example, generally, when you have your tap water in your buildings, in your bathrooms, that is connected typically to a source that has more than core quantity. So if an impure object is washed under a tap that is connected to core water, the water that drips from that object is also pure if it is connected to core water. And again, the condition stands that as long as it does not acquire the smell, color, or taste of that najasa, and it does not have that intrinsic impurity in it. So for example, you can see in certain cases that if the intrinsic impurity is there, then it would remain najis. But if it doesn't contain the intrinsic impurity, the najasa, then it will be considered pure. Now, if you have a certain container, all right, that has core water, but a part of that core water has frozen, in that case, where the remaining water quantity is not equal to core, and an impurity falls into it, then it becomes impure. Because now the water has frozen, and now so the liquid water is no longer equal to 384 liters. And so now it is not core water, it's less than core water, which is known as qalil water, which in Arabic means less, low, right? Qalil, less water. Now, what about doubts? For instance, with regard to water, all right, that was initially equal to core. If someone doubts whether it has become less than core or not, you would ignore the doubt and you would treat it as core, meaning you can still use it for purification purposes, as long as the water's properties do not change. For example, the smell, color, or taste, then it could still be used to purify. But if that water quantity was less than core initially, and now you are unsure whether it's more or less than core, then again, you would ignore the doubt and you would consider it being less than core. So in short, whenever you're doubtful about the quantity, always look at what it was initially. If it was initially core and now you're doubtful whether it isn't core or not, treat it as a core, meaning ignore the doubt. Again, Islam comes to make things simple for us, and that is why these rulings, as you can see, are evident in that way. Now, a quick question: how to establish that a particular quantity is core? How would you know a particular quantity is core? So 384 liters, okay, yes, that's the quantity of core, but how would you know it's core? Meaning how can you, so for example, one can measure it and be certain of it, right? So that's one way. You know for a fact, you've measured it. What's another way? So Ahsant, yes, these are all the different quantities, good. So you can measure it, that's one way. By yourself, you're certain, you're confident. Okay, that has no color, no change. What is another way or other ways of finding out? So as we said, see, core water has nothing to do in terms of the quality, it's with regard to the quantity, right? So for example, when it comes to color change or taste or smell, this is the qualitative part. When we talk about core, it's the quantitative, the quantity. So as you said, 384 liters, that is correct, 22 centimeters. But for example, you've measured it, that is one way. You can know by yourself. What are other ways that you can establish if a quantity is core or not? So the question might be slightly confusing. Let me help you with that, right? So the first thing is either, as you mentioned, either you can measure it yourself, knowing that it's more than 384 liters, either using a certain type of vessel that is of that volume, or by using your handspan, right? The other way is if there are two just people, two adil people, just men, if they say it is, then you can accept their answer. All right. Or someone who owns that container, he tells you, yes, it is Qur. If you trust him, then you can. But the thing is, if you do not trust them, then it would be problematic, as mentioned over here. And on that, if it is not trustworthy, then you cannot consider it to be credible. All right. So one is either you yourself are certain that it's Qur, you're confident about it, you probably measured it, you verified it, or you can refer to two adil men, or one trustworthy person, or someone who owns that water or has it in his possession or in their possession. All right. But again, something that brings certainty to you. All right, now we talk about a qalil water. What is under Qur water? So again, Qur is 384 liters. Any water that is less than 384 liters is known as qalil water. This also includes water that does not gush from the earth, meaning it's not a spring water. So it is known as qalil water. An example, if you want to think about it, it's a bottled water. That is qalil water, right? It's less than 384 liters. It's not gushing out from the earth. All right, it might have, the source might have, but now because it's in an isolated form, it's not a Qur water. So if qalil water, all right, it's not that this water is useless. We can still use it to purify objects, but in a slightly different manner. For example, if you take that bottled water and you pour it on an impure object, or an impure object, okay, comes in contact with that qalil water, it becomes impure. So that is one thing, that unlike Qur water, qalil water, when it comes into contact with some najasa, it turns it into najis as well. However, if the qalil water, and we'll see with it, right? If qalil water is poured over an object, only that amount that comes in contact will be impure, and that something that does not come in contact with it, it's pure. So this is the first mas'ala, and then I'll explain how we can benefit from qalil water. So any qalil water, if it comes in contact with najasa, that najasa will make the qalil water najis as well. But if a qalil water is poured onto an impure object to remove an intrinsic impurity, and the qalil water separates from the impure object, and if the impure object is from those things that do not become pure by washing once, then the qalil water is impure. Again, this is a similar mas'ala, right? That if the object qalil water is poured onto that object to remove the najasa, and the qalil water separates from that najis object, again, simply the qalil water is najis. Okay. Now, what are some specific conditions? So qalil water in which one's private parts are washed, it does not make anything it comes into contact with impure, provided 5 conditions are met. So for example, as long as that qalil water, so imagine, you're using qalil water to purify one's parts, as long as it does not acquire the smell, color, or taste of that impurity, it will be considered pure. If it hasn't come contact with another impurity, then it is also pure. Another impurity such as blood has not come out with the urine or feces, then it is pure. Particle of feces do not appear in that water, then it will be considered pure, and a more than usual amount of impurity has not spread around the private parts. In other words, qalil water can be used to wash one's private parts, all right? And it would not be considered impure as long as these 5 conditions are met. So that is one. Again, it's not that the qalil water cannot be used for any purpose. We use qalil water, obviously you might have experienced this while traveling, especially in the West, right? How we can purify using qalil water. Now we'll talk about flowing water. So in flowing water, what are some examples that you can think of about flowing water? Waterfall, river, yes. Good. So yes, these are main two, if you were to think about, two main types. Rain is another category. Yes, you can think of it. It's considered another category at times as a rainwater itself. Inshallah, we'll consider that. All right, so flowing water, the condition, how the way flowing water is defined. Firstly, it has a natural source. Secondly, as the name implies, it needs to flow, it flows. So either it flows naturally or it is made to flow using some means, for example, a pump. You know, for example, in different countries where farming or agriculture is one of the main industries, people use, you know, different pumping systems or to make the water flow. And the third one is that it has to be continuous, generally, right? It has to be continuous, that water needs to be continuous. So that is the three conditions. Those are the three conditions in order for water to be considered as flowing water. Now, it is not necessary that the water is connected to a natural source, but as long as it is continuous. So just to give you an example, if it is naturally disconnected from it, for example, there's water falling in above in the form of drops, as long as it flows on the earth, it is considered flowing water. So it's not that it's connected to that particular source, but as long as there's some source of continuity, right? It's falling in form of drops and it's still flowing on the earth, this will be considered as flowing water. But in this case, if there's an obstacle that prevents the water, all right, connecting the source, for example, something becomes an obstacle to the water falling or gushing. So there's a spring and something comes in middle that prevents it from gushing or disconnects it from the source, then the water that is there, you know, that has already come out, the remaining water is not considered flowing water, even if it flows on the earth, because now it's not continuous. It's not continuous with the natural source because that was disconnected or it was discontinued from the sources. Again, it's not that it has to be connected to the natural source. As long as there's continuity from the natural source, that is enough. Now, in an event where that impurity makes contact with the flowing water, even if it is less than core, even if it's like a small chain or, you know, a branch of or a channel of water that is flowing, as long as the properties do not change, the smell, color, or taste, then that water would be considered pure. All right. So even if that small channel of water comes in contact with something najis, as long as it does not change these properties, it will be considered pure. Now, if an impurity does make contact and it changes these properties, then obviously it would make it najis. Flowing water that is considered connected to a spring is pure even if it's less than coarse. So that is the one distinction, that flowing water, even if the quantity is less than core, because it's flowing water, because it's connected to a natural or it has a natural source and has that form of continuity, as long as the properties do not change because of a najis thing, it will be considered pure. The water of the spring that is not flowing, as you can see in the picture over here, right? For example, if you take out the water, the amount will be replaced, but the water is not gushing out, as you can see. Then this is not ruled as flowing water, because for flowing water, it needs to flow. And so if an impurity comes in contact and the water is less than core, in this case, then it would be considered impure. Okay, so it has to be flowing water. Water that is stagnant, so for example, at times you might have seen when a stream of water is flowing, all right, there might be a puddle beside the side of, at the side of the stream, and it's connected to the flowing water, but is not, as long as it's stagnant, it's not flowing, again, it cannot be ruled as flowing water. And so if a najasa comes into it, it will make the water najis. But if it was flowing water, if it was flowing, then it would not become najis. A spring, for example, all right, if it gushes in summer and freezes in winter, only when it's flowing, it will be able to purify. but if it's frozen, if it's not flowing, then it would not be able to purify. In a public bath, for example, right? If there's a water of a basin in a public bath, which is less than core, but it's connected to a tank, and obviously this tank has quantity greater than core or equal to core, then any najasa that comes into contact and the water does not change in its properties, it won't become najis. Again, it has the same ruling. Because it's connected to a source that is greater than in core quantity, then it won't make it najis. Tap water, again, as we said, because it's connected to a source greater than core, it can purify, and it has the same rulings of the core water. As long as the properties of the water do not change by a najasa, it is pure. Rainwater, as it was mentioned, right? One of the examples, rainwater. So this is the masala for rainwater. If rain falls once on an impure object, and that impure object does not contain any intrinsic impurity like blood, like urine, right? The area that comes into contact with the rain becomes pure. So that is the rainwater, even though that rainwater is by drops, drop by drop, but as long as it is rainfall that is falling on that impure object, and there's no intrinsic impurity there, like it's not urine or blood that is still there, then any area that comes in contact with the rain becomes pure. However, if a person's body or clothing, if it has become impure by urine specifically, then the ihtiyat is that the obligatory precaution is that the rainfall has to fall on it twice to become pure. Now, another interesting ruling is that with carpets, with clothing and other things, you don't need to wring it out. You don't need to, turn the clothes or in a manner wring that the way rainwater would, come out of it. Rather, it's not necessary. As long as the rain falls into it, it will make it pure. Of course, like in the case, for example, if it's only a few drops of rainwater, that will not work. It has to basically have rainfall on it. All right, someone can actually see that it is raining. It's not just merely some few drops that have fallen on it. Okay. Now, if a rain falls on an intrinsic impurity and the water splashes, in the event that none of the intrinsic impurity is included in the splash water, again, it does not acquire the taste, smell, or color of that najasa, then the water is pure. Okay. So, for example, if rain falls on blood and the water splashes, in the event that the particles of blood are coming with the splash water, because the properties of the color, the water has changed, that's why it'll be najis. But if there's no najasa included in the splash water, then it will be considered pure. The reason I mentioned this, so for example, at times people have this mas'ala, right? Say, for example, they might have used the restroom and or actually not in this particular example, we'll mention it, but anyhow, if they've been walking, they might have been out inside the rain and there might have been blood on the floor. If the water has splashed onto their clothes, but it doesn't turn, for example, red, it doesn't have the particles of the blood, in that case, the water will be considered pure. All right, it hasn't made your clothes impure. Now, on the roof, for example, when you have najasa on the roof, okay, if there's an intrinsic impurity on the roof, as long as it keeps raining and any water that comes into contact with the impure object falls down, is pure. So you don't need to worry about it, right? That, for example, there's a najis object on the roof, right? As long as it continues to rain and the water is falling, you don't need to worry that whether this is najis or not, it is pure. But in the case where the rain stops and the water that falls from the gutter now, and you know that it has become contact with the impure object, then it will be impure. Okay. What about impure ground? So for example, ground that is najis becomes pure if rain falls onto it. Okay, so if the ground was najis, rain falls onto it, it becomes pure. And if rainwater begins to flow on the ground, while it is still raining, any object that comes in contact with this, rain, for example, any surface, any area that it comes in contact with this water, it is still able to purify that water, okay, area. So similar to, the flowing water, if that water falls and it starts flowing and it covers a certain area that might have been najis, it would be able to purify it, okay? So it's not just that it falls on that ground directly, it could fall under the roof and it might fall onto that area and then it starts flowing. It will also make the area, the najis area, if there is any, pure. What about soil? So for example, if there's impure soil that has soaked rainwater, for example, they say there's mud that is mixed with that might have become najis because of urine, because of blood, for example. If it is completely soaked by rainwater, it becomes pure on the condition that the water has not turned into mixed water by coming in contact with the oil, okay? If you're sure that it has become mixed water, then it's a different mas'ala. But if you're not certain, if you do not know whether the water has turned into mixed water or not, you will consider it to be pure. Okay, you would consider that it has become pure because of that rain. In a puddle, for example, whenever rainwater collects in a place, even if its quantity is less than core, in the event that an impure object is washed into it, as long as it's raining and the water does not acquire the smell, color, or taste of the impurity, the impure object becomes pure, right? So if, for example, if it's raining and you start washing, say a najis sock or cloth, najis a part in that puddle, as long as it's raining, it will make it pure. We mentioned this rain on a carpet. So for example, if rain falls on a carpet that is pure, but it's spread on a ground that is impure. So the carpet itself is tahir, it's packed, it's pure, but it's spread on a ground that is impure. As long as it's it's raining, the water is soaked by the carpet and comes into contact with the ground. Not only that the carpet does not become najis, even the ground becomes tahir because of it. Okay, so that's another mas'ala when it comes to rain on the carpet. Well water. So with regard to well water, okay, again, what is well water? It's the water that gushes from the ground, even if the quantity is less than 384 liters, even if it's less than core, okay? In the case an impurity comes into contact with it and the properties do not change, it will be considered pure. Again, even though it's not 384 liters, it's less than core, as long as the properties do not change, then it will be considered pure. And if an impurity falls into it and it changes those properties, all right, in the event that the change in water disappears. So for example, you might have had well water where najasa fell into the well water and the property changed. But after a while, all right, after a while, the well water changed and then the properties restored back to original water, meaning the color is no longer there, the smell is no longer there, then it would be considered pure, okay? However, as you can see over here, it's based on obligatory precaution, conditional on it mixing with the water that gushes from the well. So because the reason why the properties would have been disappeared, is that because the water is well water, it's mixing with the water that is gushing out from the earth, okay? So for example, if a well water did become najis, however, because of change in properties, after a while, when enough water might have mixed up from the earth, gushing out from earth, and the properties are now restored, they're back to what water looks like, it will be considered pure. Now we come to the mas'ala relating to the different types of water. So what type of water can we use to do wudu or ghusl? So now knowing the qualitative and quantitative types of water, what type of water can be used to do wudu or ghusl? Okay, clean water. So, clean water, pure water. Good. So not that the water has to be clean, but rather water has to be pure, right? You might have water that might be visually clean. There might nothing be in it, But for example, it might still be mudaf. Like for example, rose water, apparently it's clean water, but it's mudaf, right? Rainwater, you could do wudu with it, yes. If you, for example, in a puddle, like that's another masala as well, right? With kur water, definitely, even with qalil water, well water, yeah. But in terms of quality, it has to be pure water, which is in the Arabic terminology is mutlaq. In the Sharia terminology, it doesn't have to be mixed water. It should not be mixed water. It should not be mudaf, right? And whether you do it with a well or tap water or even qalil water, that is perfectly fine. Now, so as we mentioned, the mixed water, it cannot be used for ghusl or wudu, and neither it can be used to purify. Mudaf water cannot be, mixed water cannot be used to purify. So even if the quantity is greater than kul, even if you have a big tub that is more than 384 liters of mixed water, and a najasa falls into it, all of it turns najis. Okay, so that is the mixed water. Now, mixed water, if najis mixed water is mixed with kur water or flowing water in a way that you cannot no longer call it mixed water, it becomes pure. So for example, that might have been najis juice. If it got mixed with kur water or some flowing water, and now you cannot distinguish, you can't see the, for example, in orange juice, you cannot see the orange color or the smell of it any longer in the water, then now you can regard it that it has become pure. Water that was unmixed and it is not known whether or not the water has become mixed is meaning that purifies an impure object, and wudu and ghusl performed that are valid. So in short, it is a similar ruling to what it was with kur, right? You would ignore the doubt and you would consider the initial condition. So for example, if you initially had water that was unmixed, but now you do not know whether it became mixed or not over the course of time, you would consider it mutlaq, unmixed, all right? And you can use it to purify objects, and you can use it to do wudu and ghusl. However, the water that was initially mixed, and now you do not know whether it became unmixed, in this case, you would ignore the doubt, and you cannot use it for purifying objects or for wudu and ghusl. Now, if you do not know whether a particular water was mixed or unmixed, initially, you did from the, you just found water, you did not know initially whether this was mixed or unmixed, then in that case, you cannot use it to perform wudu and ghusl, okay? So, as I mentioned, a quick distinction, in these cases, you did know what it was initially, but you do not know what it was now. In this case, you did not even know what it was originally. In this case, you cannot use this particular water to make ghusl or wudu, or even purify other objects. Water that was pure and it is not known whether it has become impure or not is pure. Again, ignoring the doubts. Water that was initially pure, whether or not it changed, you're not sure, it's still pure. Water that was initially najis, and you do not know whether it has become pure or not, you would treat it as impure. So again, ignoring the doubts. Now, properties, if a najasa, again, like blood or urine, it comes in contact with water and changes the qualities, like smell, color, or taste, even if it is kur or flowing water, it will make it najis. Okay, it will be considered najis. So the properties, if they change, and the specific properties like smell, color, and taste, if they change, then it will, because of a najasa, it will be considered impure. If it changed not because of that najis thing, but because of some other thing, then it won't be impure. For example, like an ink color, a dye was added to the water. It won't become najis because of it, right? The change in these properties has to be because of the najis thing. Now, with regard to water, which is into which an intrinsic, like your impurity falls, and there's a change, in the event that it's connected to kur or flowing water, or rains on it, or wind makes the rain fall onto it, or gutter, If the change disappears, meaning if these properties restore back to how they were of the water, then it will become pure. Okay, so that is also important. If the properties change back to what it was originally, then it will be considered pure. Again, if you're washing an impure object and it is purified with flowing water or cool water, the water that drips from this object after the final wash, again, it's considered pure. Now, talking about this topic, last topic, and inshallah, we'll conclude with the quick game there, the Islamic laws. So we mentioned when we were talking about that when Allah describes the mu'minun, He says, these are the people, الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ, that indeed, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the successful ones are the believers. Who are these believers? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ, those who are humble in their prayers. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, who prevent themselves from vain talk. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ, who give alms. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, and those who protect their private parts. إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, except for their spouses or أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُم. So in short, it is wajib for one to cover their private parts from people who are mukallaf. And you said mukallaf is a terminology, is a word in Sharia that is used to describe anyone who is on which Sharia has become wajib. So they're adults now, and they have to follow the code of law. Or if they are mahram. So we said mahram are the people whom a person cannot marry because of the relation with them. For example, a mother, a sister, right? They're haram for that person to marry. And similarly, it is obligatory for one to cover his or her private parts from an insane person, from a person who is, even though the Sharia is not wajib on that insane person, you still have to cover your parts, guard your parts from that person, and even from a child who is mumayyiz. So mumayyiz is a child who is able to discern, who is able to distinguish what is good, what is right, what is wrong. Okay, that is, you do not need to cover them from your spouses, but all these other categories, you need to guard your private parts. So now we come to these specific rulings based on obligatory and ihtiyat wajib, and it has been echoed in different instances. When a person is relieving themselves, emptying their bowels or bladder, neither the front of that person, neither the back of that person must face the qibla. Okay, and it is not enough to just move the private parts. The person's front, back, and private parts, neither of them should face the qibla. And the ihtiyat mustahab, the recommended precaution, is that even a child should not be made sit in a way where his front or back is facing the qibla when relieving that, himself. The other ruling, there are haram places for one to relieve themselves. So there are 4 places in which a person is not allowed to relieve themselves. In dead alleys without the owner's consent, like for example, even in public alleys, as long as it causes harm to the pedestrians, it's not allowed to relieve themselves in that place. On someone's property that they do not have consent for, a place which has been waqf, so it's a charitable endowment for use by particular groups. So for example, there are certain schools, some schools, if they've been waqf, again, obviously, if they have specific places for relieving themselves, that's a separate issue. On the grave of believers, again, it is, or whether it is disrespectful to them or not, one is not allowed to relieve themselves on the graves of the believers. Okay, and it also applies to the same thing, that if it causes dishonor to one of the sacred things of the religion, then it is not allowed. Now, after emptying one's bladder, right, once they've used, washing it once is sufficient. Washing the urinary outlet once is sufficient, but the ihtiyat mustahab, it is better to wash it twice, and even better to wash it 3 times. So once is enough, but washing it twice is ihtiyat mustahab, and on the 3rd one, it's even better to wash it 3 times. If a person is doubtful whether they purified or whether the parts have been purified or not, it is necessary. So it's not that you ignore the doubt, you actually have to make sure that you have purified it. Okay, even if usually he does it, but you have to make sure that he has purified it. And for example, if someone had offered their prayers and then they doubt whether they purified or not, the prayers that have been performed already are valid, but for any other new prayers that they wish to make, they have to go and purify themselves. Okay, so again, it's not that they have to repeat the prayers because they've completed the prayers and then they realized after that. So those prayers are fine. For the new prayers, they would have to purify their private parts if they might have forgotten or might be doubtful about it. What are some recommended acts to do when relieving oneself? So just 3 more things and inshallah we'll go on to the game. So what are some acts that you may know of, recommended acts that are recommended when using the restroom or relieving oneself? Good, so putting the pressure on the left foot. Covering the head, ahsant. Do not face the qibla, as we said, yes. So that is ihtiyat wajib, right? Unrecommended, but ihtiyat wajib, meaning we have to do that. Enter with left foot, ahsant, very good, mashallah. So I see that everyone has been already, alhamdulillah, prepared for the don't talk, very good. Leave with the right, mashallah. So I think everyone's pretty much ready for the okay, good. Yes. So so sitting in a place where no one sees, entering with the left, exiting with the right, covering the head, placing the pressure or the weight on the left leg. And another thing is emptying the bladder. So relieving oneself before offering prayers, before sleeping. Okay. Now, what are some makruh acts? On the other hand, facing the sun or the moon. So, if it is covered by a curtain, then it's not makruh, but you shouldn't be facing it. Facing the wind on roads and streets and alleyways, in front of a door of a house, under fruit yielding trees, it's makruh to relieve oneself over there. Eating is makruh. Taking a long time, it's makruh. Washing with right hand is makruh. Talking, as you had mentioned, is makruh. Again, if it is someone has been compelled to talk, if you're in a situation, for example, that you have to talk, then it is not makruh. Or if you're saying the dhikr of Allah, for example, there are certain adhkar that one can recite when relieving themselves, and then in that case it would not be makruh. Urinating while standing, for example, or urinating on hard ground, or in nests of dens of animals, for example, in water that might be stagnant, it is makruh. And it is makruh also to withhold urinating. So for example, if someone has the urge that they need to go relieve themselves, but they're not doing that, they're withholding it, then it is makruh. And in some cases, if it is harmful in the general sense for the person, then it is also haram for them to withhold themselves. All right, there's a strong ta'kid that one has to relieve themselves when they feel they need to. So that was the review. Now, inshallah, we'll just move on to the questions. So it's slightly different than Kahoot, but inshallah, hopefully you liked it. So you can choose your avatar, and then we'll be asking questions once you have done that. So I've enabled the names so you can see each other. So we have 12 people. I'll just give a few more minutes for people to join in. So again, in this, similar to Kahoot, you'll answer questions and you'll proceed, all right, as you go along. So we have 7 people connected. I think we still have about 5 more. We'll give a minute. the winter time, so I see a lot of penguins. So probably 3 more people joining us. Okay. So we have 11. I see there are a few more joining in. So inshallah, while people are joining in, as this is a Thursday night, inshallah we'll recite the dua while remembering, for the fulfillment of the halajat of all the believers, brothers and sisters, for the safety and security, for their well-being, for those who are afflicted with the disease, for them being relieved from that disease with a speedy and complete recovery, for those who are away from their homes, from their safe return back to their homes, for those who are seeking sustenance, for increase in their sustenance, for those who are, for the scholars of our community, of our loved ones, their protection, for increasing their tawfiqat, for the hastening of the advent of Hajj, and for all of us considered amongst us ashab, Ansar, Sa'aban. Let us recite the ayah Karima 5 times. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم اشف كل ما.
Ameen, ameen. Thank you very much, Sheikhna. Inshallah, then we'll begin. So hopefully everyone's connected and we'll start. So you'll have 30 seconds for each question. Let's see. Which of the following is mudaf water? You would be able to see the question on your screen. All right, so the options. So once you answer that, you'll get the points for the question. So everyone's trying to reach the top. I believe the options, it's not showing the options. The options were, let me see if I'm able to see the question itself. Okay, unfortunately I'm not. So the answer was rose water. That rose water is mudaf water. Core water is equal to what volume in liters? There are different options that you will be able to see on your screen. You would have to select the correct option. So core water is equal to what volume of water? Okay, so it's equal to 384 liters. The next question, change in which of the following property of water does not matter if an impurity is added to it? Is it temperature, it is color, is it smell, or is it taste? Which of the following which of the following properties, if the change occurs in it, it does not matter? So temperature, if the temperature changes, it does not matter. If some part of the core water freezes and the remaining water does not amount to core, in the event that an impurity comes into contact with it, it becomes what? Pure or impure? So what happens if some part of the core water freezes, the other one, if there's an najasa that comes into it? It becomes impure, right? Because now it'll be qalil water, it's less than core water. Okay, the next question. Which of the following is not a way to establish that a quantity of water is core or not? One person is certain or confident. Two just men. Someone who possesses the water. Or you consider it to be likely equal to core. So which of these is not a way to establish that a quantity of water is core or not? So it was not likely, you have to be certain. Which of the following is not necessary for a flowing water? It has to have a natural source. It has to be connected with core water. It has to be connected with a natural source. It has to be continuous, and it has to be flowing. Which of the following is not necessary for flowing water? So it has to have an original natural source. It has to be connected to the natural source. It has to be flowing, or it has to be continuous. So it's not necessary for it to be connected. As long as it has a natural source, it's continuous and flowing, that's enough. Tap water in buildings and bathrooms are generally considered what? Mulaf water, mixed water. What type of water is tap water in buildings considered as generally? So in buildings, right, they're connected with core water, and that's why they're known as core water, to a source that is more than. How many times does rain have to fall on clothing made impure by urine to purify it? So imagine a urine has impure, made of clothing, impure. How many times does the rain have to fall on it? Once, twice, thrice? So twice, right? Water that was pure and it is not known whether it has become impure or not is what? So you knew initially it was pure, but now you do not know whether it is pure or impure. What would you consider it to be? So yes, you would consider it to be pure because it was initially pure. Ignore the doubt. After emptying the bladder, how many times must the private part be washed? Again, the emphasis on must. Once, twice, 3 times. So how many times must the private part be washed? So once, twice is ihtiyat mustahab, and 3rd times it's better, even better. Which of the following is makruh when using the toilet? So I don't see, again, sorry about that, I don't see the choices there. So unfortunately, I may not be able to state the choices, but you would be able to see those choices on your screen, on your devices. I think facing the sun, right? Might have been the correct answer. And the last question, urinating while standing is what? Wajib, mubah, makruh, or haram? Urinating while standing. So it is makruh, right? It's disapproved. So congratulations, we have Yusuf with the highest points, and then we have Miqdad and Lucky, and followed by Ali Mahboubi, Furball, Layla, Inaya. So congratulations to you all. Jazakumullah. So alhamdulillah, hopefully we're able to learn a few things inshallah today. And Jazakumullah. Inshallah, with this we'll end our session for today with the ziyarah. And I'll request our respected brother Sayyid Mahboubi to inshallah recite the Ziyarat Waritha. Before that, inshallah, just making this announcement on behalf of the Jama'ah regarding the programs, that inshallah you'll be informed about the programs, inshallah, once we go in person. Until then, we'll be continuing to have these programs online. And inshallah, for Salatul Jumu'ah as well, that the Salatul Jumu'ah has been suspended due to the rising cases, as the email was sent out to the community. And inshallah, we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieves us from this difficult time, provides us relief, and inshallah hasten the advent of al-Hujjah, as that is the greatest difficulty that we face in this era. Inshallah, we'll request our respected Sayyid Mahboubi to inshallah recite the ziyarah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam wa
Alaykum
rahmatullah.
assalam wa rahmatullah, Sayyidina.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك يا وارث آدم الصفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث النوح النبي الله
السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن الثار والمتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأعطيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله وحتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن لومة قتلتك ولعن لومة ظلمتك ولعن لومة سمعت بذلك فرزيت بي. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت النور في الأسلام الشامخات والأرحام المطهرات لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مطليمة ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرازي الزكي العادي المهدي. وأشهد أنك الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلم الهدى والعروة الوثقى. ووجدت على أهل الدنيا ووشد الله وملائكته وأنبياء ورسولا أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتي عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سيل وأمر لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة الأكبر الإسلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الشهيد ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك يا الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك يا المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن لومة قتلت ولعن لومة ظلمت ولعن لومة سمعت بذلك فرزيت بي. تمام زيارة شهر كربلاء. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليك يا أصفياء الله وأوداع. السلام عليك يا أنصار الدين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة السيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أنصار بمحمد الحسن بن علي ولي الزكي ناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار بأبي عبد الله بأبي أنت وأمي. تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة أبو الفضل عباس عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا أبو الفضل عباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن السيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول قوم الإسلام وأقوام الإيمان وأقوام بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصرت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخي. ولأخيك فنعم الأخي الموسي فلعن لومة قتلك ولعن لومة ظلمك ولعن لومة استحلت منك المحارم وانتكت حرمة الإسلام فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصي والأخي يدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة الربيع الرغب في زايد في غير زايد في غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل ويلقاك الله بدرجات آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك الشمس والشموس مدفون بأرزة السلطان والرزق، كن شفينا وشفي والدي في يوم الجزاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك الشريك القرآن، السلام عليك بات الإيمان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسال له مخرجك وزورك وننصارك وشيتك ومن أنصارك وانك وشيتك والزوارك في الدنيا والآخرة. السلام عليك يا آل بيت النبوات وموزي رسالة الجميع ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعات وفي كل ساعات وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك التوى وتمتعوا فيها تاويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. جزاكم Allah. Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation, Sayyid Hafidullah. Inshallah, with this, brothers and sisters, we'll conclude this beautiful gathering. May Allah keep you all protected. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair.